Abigail Carter pressed her father's cold, shaking hand to her cheek and swore on her own life that he would not die owing a single coin. Then, at midnight, a stranger's carriage stopped at her door, and a man she had never met laid a sealed bank draft on her table. "I'll pay every debt your family owes," he said, "if you marry me by dawn." She believed she was rescuing a poor farmer too proud to be alone. She had no notion he would carry her to a manor and a title that would burn the world she knew to the ground. Before we begin, if stories of courage, betrayal, and a love that rises out of the ashes stir something in your heart, subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story has traveled. The fever had taken Thomas Carter's voice 3 days back, but it had not taken his pride, and that was the cruelest thing of all. "Abigail." He breathed her name more than spoke it. "Girl, come here." "I'm right here, Pa. I never left." She knelt at the edge of the cot and kept his hand between both of hers, rubbing warmth into fingers that had gone the color of candle tallow. "You hush now. You save your strength. For what?" It wasn't a question. He turned his head against the rolled coat that served him for a pillow and looked at her with eyes that were still sharp, still his, even as the rest of him failed. "Don't lie to your father on what may be his last night. You were never any good at it. You ain't dying tonight." "No." A sound came out of him that might have been a laugh once. "Then somebody best tell my chest that." She wiped his brow with the corner of her apron and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wasn't either a lie or a wound. "Where's the notice?" he said. "What notice?" "Abigail." "I burned it." "You didn't burn it." His grip tightened, and there was more strength in it than she expected, more than a dying man ought to have. "You don't burn a thing like that. You memorize it. You read it till the words go numb. Now where is it?" She reached behind her without rising, and pulled the folded paper from beneath the bread crock where she'd hidden it, as if hiding a thing could unwrite what was on it. She put it in his hand. He could not lift it to read, so she read it for him low the way you'd read scripture over a grave. "By order of Mr. Elias Caldwell, holder of all debts pertaining to the property and persons of Thomas Carter, payment of the sum in full is required by the morning of the 21st day. Failing such payment, the property, the land, the house, and all attached obligations shall pass to the lien holder, and any person's resident shall be removed." She lowered the page. "That's the long and short of it." "What's the date?" "You know the date." "Say it." "It's the 20th, Pa." She folded the notice once, twice small. "It's the 20th night. They come at dawn." He was quiet a long moment. Outside something dripped. The roof had given up its argument with the weather weeks ago, and the sound filled the silence, the way water fills a sinking boat, patient and certain. "How much?" he said. "It don't matter how much. We don't have a tenth of it." "How much, Abigail? I have a right to know the size of the thing that's burying me." And here was the place she had been dreading for 11 days, because she had a secret, and the secret was a number, and she had carried it alone because to speak it would be to make it real for him, and she had wanted, God help her, she had wanted to let him die believing the hole was shallower than it was. "It's the debt you took," she said carefully. "The one on the land. That's what the town knows." "That's not what I asked." She closed her eyes. "There's more than that." "More. I found your other book, Pa, behind the rafter wrapped in the oilcloth. I weren't snooping. I was looking for the deed and I found it." She made herself look at him. "I found what you really owed Caldwell. Not the land loan. The other one. The private one. The one with the interest that grows like a thing that's hungry." For the first time, his eyes left hers. "You should not have found that," he said. "Well, I did. And I never told a living soul, not the doctor, not the minister, not one neighbor on this whole hungry road. I never said the figure out loud. Not once." Her voice cracked clean down the middle, and she let it. "I've been carrying it like a stone in my mouth so you wouldn't have to." "So you tell me, Pa, what did you sign? What did you put your name to that a man like Caldwell would come for the house with the doctor's wagon still in the yard? Thomas Carter wept then without sound, the way old men weep when the body's too weak to give the grief its full shape. "I was trying to save the harvest," he whispered. 2 bad years, then the 3rd, and Caldwell comes smiling, offering, always offering. I thought 1 more season, 1 good summer. That's all I ever needed, girl. 1 good summer. I know, Pa. You don't tell anyone that number. You hear me, not a soul. I told you. I never have. Then keep on. His hand went slack in hers. Some secrets you carry them into the ground. That one you carry it into yours. She did not know kneeling there that within the hour a man would write that very number on a sheet of paper and slide it across her table, and that the writing of it would crack the floor of her whole understanding of the world. She only knew that her father had stopped talking, and that his breath had gone shallow and fast, and that the 21st morning was coming whether she was ready for it or not. She built the fire back up, though there was hardly wood for it. She set water to warm, though there was hardly need. She did the small useless things hands do when the heart has nothing left, and she was wringing out the cloth a second time when she heard it. Wheels. She went still. No honest wheels turned on that road at midnight. The doctor had come and gone, and said what doctors say when they mean to be paid for saying nothing. The minister wouldn't ride out till morning to do the only business he had left with this house. And neighbors had stopped coming when the word debt started traveling faster than the word sick. The wheels stopped. A horse stamped. Then boots measured unhurried boots a man who had no fear of where he was going. A fist knocked. 3 times. Even. "Pa," she breathed. "Stay quiet." She took up the iron poker from beside the hearth, because a woman alone with a dying father and a debt on her head learns to answer a midnight door with iron in her hand. She lifted the latch. She opened it the width of her own shoulders, and no more. The man who stood there was soaked through and did not seem to know it. "Miss Carter," he said. Not a question. He knew her name. "Whatever you've come to collect," she said, "you can come back at dawn with the rest of them and take your turn." "I've not come to collect anything." "Then you've come to the wrong house. There's nothing here but debt and a sick man, and the bank's already spoken for both. I know exactly what's in this house." He had a low voice, level, the kind that didn't need to rise because it had never once in its life been ignored. "That is precisely why I've come. May I step in? The weather has rather made up its mind about me." "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "You don't." "Then I'll thank you to say your business from where you're standing." He studied her, not her face exactly, but something behind it, the way a man reads a ledger and not a portrait. "You're holding a fire iron behind that door," he said. "Keep it. I'd think less of you if you weren't. But I'd ask you to hear me before you decide to use it." She didn't lower the poker. She did open the door. He stepped in and removed his hat, and water ran from the brim and pooled on her broken floor, and he paid it no mind at all. He was younger than his voice, perhaps 30, perhaps a hard-lived less, with a face that gave away nothing it did not choose to. "My name is Nathaniel Ashford," he said. "Means nothing to me. It will." He said it without arrogance, almost gently, the way a man states the weather for tomorrow. Then his eyes found the cot and the shape of her father on it, and for the briefest instant something passed over him that she could not name. Not pity. Pity she'd had her fill of, but something older and harder. "He's worse than they told me." "Worse than who told you? Is their water clean? There's a man dying on that cot, and a stranger dripping on my floor asking after my water. I asked you a question, Mr. Ashford." He looked at her, then full on, and she had the unwelcome sense of being seen all the way through, down past the iron poker, and the swollen eyes, and the apron stiff with 3 days of nursing. "Mr. Caldwell told me," he said, "among other things." The name went through her like a cold draft. "You're his." "No." Quick, almost sharp. "I am not Caldwell's. Understand that if you understand nothing else tonight. I am not his man, his agent, his cousin, or his friend. But I know what he holds over this house, and I know the morning that's coming, and I know." He hesitated, and it was the first hesitation she'd seen in him. "I know more about your situation than you would credit, and most of it I came by honestly. Most of it. We'll get to the rest." She set the poker down at last, but within reach, leaned against the wall by her knee. "Sit then. We've one chair. Take it before you fall down. You look about to." "I'm quite all right standing." "Sit down, Mr. Ashford. I won't have a second man collapsing in my house tonight. One's plenty." A flicker, surprise, or the start of a smile that thought better of itself, and he sat. "You said you'd not come to collect?" she said, standing over him now, which she found she liked. "Then say what you have come for, and say it plain. I'm short on sleep, and shorter on patience, and I've buried more tonight than just the firewood." Nathaniel Ashford reached into his coat. She tensed old habit, but what he drew out was paper, a folded packet sealed with wax, and a second smaller sheet kept separate. He set the sealed packet on the table between them, but kept one hand flat upon it. "What's that?" she said. "A bank draft. Drawn and ready. It wants only a name and a signature to become as good as gold in any house of business between here and Boston." "Whose name?" "Yours eventually. Mine tonight." "And what's it for?" "It is for," he said, "every debt your family owes. The land loan, the arrears, the lien Caldwell filed, the notice for Dawn." His hand did not move from the paper. "All of it. Paid in full before the magistrate ever wakes, so that when his men come up that road in the morning they find a house that owes nothing to anyone, and a deed that's clean as the day it was first cut." She did not move. She did not breathe. The fire popped, and she didn't flinch. "That kind of money," she said slowly, "doesn't ride out to a dying farmer's house at midnight for the pleasure of charity. So I'll ask you a third time, Mr. Ashford, and I'd be obliged if the third time bought me a straight answer. What do you want?" He held her eye. "I want you to marry me," he said. "Tonight, before dawn. I want a minister woke and a name on a register and 2 signatures witnessed, and in exchange every debt this family carries dies on that table." He tapped the paper once. "That is the whole of it. That is what I want." The silence after was a living thing. "You're mad," she said. "I've been called worse and by better. You ride up to a stranger's house in the dead of night and ask her to wed you before the sun's up, a man whose name I'd never heard till the rain spat you on my doorstep, and you'd have me believe there's no madness in it. I'd have you believe it's the soundest offer you'll hear in your life, and the only one." He leaned forward. "Miss Carter, at dawn you lose the house, the land, your father's grave rights, and your good name in one stroke. Your father does not survive a removal, you know that better than I. They'll put him out on that road to die in front of every soul who used to call him neighbor, and they'll call it the law, and they'll be right." His voice never rose. "Or you sign, and it all stops. Tonight, which is the madness taking the rope, or the man who's holding it out? There's always a price. I've named it. You've named a thing, not a reason. Men don't marry for nothing. So what is it I'm worth to you, Mr. Ashford, that you'd burn a fortune to set on my finger because I'm a ruined girl in a falling house? And whatever you think you're buying, I promise you the seller knows the goods better than you do." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "You're worth more than you've ever been allowed to know," he said quietly. "But that's not an answer either, and you'd not believe it tonight, so let it lie." "It won't lie. I won't let it." "I know you won't." And there again, that flicker of something like respect or recognition, as if he'd come a long way expecting to find a frightened girl, and found instead a thing with teeth, and was not displeased. "Ask me what you'll ask me. I'll answer what I can." "Why me?" "Because of who your father is, was, is." He caught himself on the tense. "Because of something he did long before you were grown, that has cost more men than you'd credit, and will cost more still, and because—" His jaw set. "Because I have spent a great deal of effort, and a greater deal of money learning, that the only honest person left standing within 100 miles of this whole rotten business is a girl nobody ever thought to ask. My father's a farmer. Your father, Nathaniel said, is a great deal more than that. and so I suspect are you." She felt the floor tilt under her, though it had not moved. Behind her, her father's breath rasped, caught, rasped on. "You keep talking like there's a world I can't see," she said. "Riddles. I haven't the time for riddles, sir. I've got till dawn. Then let me show you the only piece that matters tonight." He slid the second sheet, the smaller one he'd kept apart, across the table toward her face down. "Before you decide, look at that. Not the draft, that. And tell me if a riddle's worth your while." She turned it over. It was a figure, a single number written in a clean, educated hand, a sum of money. And it was not the figure the town knew. It was not the land loan that the notice named. It was the other one. The private debt. The hungry one with the growing interest. The one wrapped in oilcloth behind the rafter. The one she had read until the words went numb, and then never, not once, not to the doctor, nor the minister, nor the empty fields, nor her own reflections spoken aloud. The number on the paper was that number. To the last coin. "No," she said. The word came out of her very small. "No." "Miss Carter, no, you stop. You stop right there." She was on her feet, though she didn't remember rising, and the poker was in her hand again, though she didn't remember taking it. "How? How do you have this number? Nobody has this number. Nobody alive but me knows this number, and my father, and he's not told a soul in years. He can barely tell me, so you answer me right now. How does that figure come to be in your hand, Abigail?" It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it stopped her more surely than the iron would have stopped him. "Sit down." "I'll stand." "Then stand. But hear this, because it's the truth, and you'll want to have heard me say it plain on the night in your own house before you sign anything." He rose to meet her slow hands open and away from his coat so she could see them. "That number is not in my hand because Caldwell gave it to me. Caldwell does not have that number. He thinks he does. He's wrong. The figure he filed at the magistrate's is a lie built on top of the truth, the way a man paints over rot." He drew breath. "I have the true number because I have your father's true account. The real one. The one Caldwell forged a second version of, so that what your father actually owed and what Caldwell claims he owes are two different sums, and the difference between them. Miss Carter, the difference is the whole crime. Your father didn't borrow his way into ruin. He was buried under it, on purpose, by a man who needed him gone. So, she heard the words. She could not yet hold them. "You're saying," she said, "you're saying my pa was—" "I'm saying you've been told a story your whole life about a foolish farmer who couldn't manage a loan." His eyes were steady on her. "And I'm telling you that story is the lie. And the proof of it is the number on that paper, which is the true sum, which no honest man and no dishonest one should be able to know. And yet here I am, knowing it, having come a very long way to put it in front of the one person who'd recognize it for what it is." From the cot a sound. Her father's voice thready, but his words clear as a struck bell. "Ashford." They both turned. Thomas Carter's eyes were open. They were fixed on Nathaniel, and in them was something Abigail had never once seen on her father's face, in all her years. Not fear, not surprise, recognition. "You came," her father whispered. "After all this time, you actually came." "Pa!" Abigail crossed to him. "Pa, you know this man." But her father wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Nathaniel Ashford with an expression caught somewhere between dread and a terrible exhausted relief, and his cracked lips were moving, and what came out of them was not an answer to her at all. "Does she know?" Thomas breathed. "Tell me you didn't tell her. Tell me you came for the debt and nothing more. Ashford, tell me my girl is still out of it." "She's still out of it," Nathaniel said very low. "I've told her nothing she can't unhear by morning. The debt, the draft, the marriage, that's all. Swear it." "On what's left of my own father's name, I swear it. She knows only what she had to choose." "What is happening?" Abigail said. Her voice did not sound like her own. She looked from the dying man on the cot to the dripping stranger by her table, the two of them speaking over her head in a language built of things she'd never been told, and a cold certainty rose in her that the world she'd woke up in that morning, poor plain grieving but knowable, had ended some time in the last quarter hour, and she had not been told. Pa, look at me. You know him. How do you know him? What is the both of you keeping from me in my own house? Her father looked at her then. And he was crying again, the silent old man weeping, but he was smiling too. And that was somehow worse. Marry him, Thomas Carter said. Pa, you listen to me, girl. You've been carrying that number in your mouth like a stone, you said. 11 days. Alone. His hand found hers, and gripped the last of his strength poured into it. I never wanted you near any of this. I spent your whole life keeping you small and safe and poor on this little patch of nothing, because nothing was the only thing they couldn't take. And I was wrong, Abigail. I was a coward, and I was wrong. And the men who buried me are coming up that road at dawn, whether you marry or not. He pulled her closer. But if you marry him, if you sign that man's paper, then you don't go down with me. You hear? You don't go in the ground with your fool of a father. You walk out of this house owing nobody nothing with a name on you that Caldwell can't touch. And then, his voice failed, came back. And then, by God, you make them pay for what they did to me. You're the only one of us they were never clever enough to be afraid of. Yet. Pa, you're frightening me. Good. Be frightened. Be frightened and do it anyway. That's the only kind of brave that ever counted. He turned his head. Ashford. The minister. How long? I left a man at Reverend Whitlock's an hour past. He'll have him roused and waiting. We can be there before 2. Then go. Thomas's eyes were already closing. Go now. Don't wait on a dying man to bless it. I bless it. There. It's blessed. Go. No. Abigail's hand tightened on his. No, I'm not leaving you. Not tonight. Not for any draft or any name or any man on this earth. You think I'd marry a stranger over your last breath? You think that's what I'd... I think, her father said, and his eyes opened one final time, and they were clear, and they were her father's eyes all the way down. I think you've spent 11 days being braver than any soul should have to be alone for me. And I think the bravest thing left in front of you is to let me spend my last hours knowing you're safe. Don't take that from me, Abigail. It's all I've got left to give you. Let me give it. The fire cracked. The rain went on, and Nathaniel Ashford stood very still by the table, hat in his hands, watching a thing he had set in motion run its course, and for once his face hid nothing at all. Abigail Carter knelt on the broken floor of the only home she'd ever known, holding her father's hand, and she understood that there was no version of this night that did not break her. She could break by burying him in shame at dawn, the house gone, the name gone, the grave unbought. Or she could break some other way, a way she didn't yet have the shape of, a way that smelled of riddles and forged ledgers, and a stranger who knew a number he had no right to know. She thought desperation does not make people foolish, it makes them precise. She did not know yet where the thought had come from. She did not know that she'd carry it like a creed for the rest of her life, that it would stand between her and ruin a dozen times in the years ahead, in rooms far grander and more dangerous than this one. She knew only that it was true, and that it was the first thing all night that had felt like solid ground. She stood. She turned to the man by the table. That number, she said. The true one. Do you have the proof of it? The real account. Not just the figure, the paper, the ledger, the thing that shows what Caldwell did. Something changed in Nathaniel Ashford's face. He had come, she would understand much later, expecting one of two women, a frightened one he'd have to coax, or a greedy one he'd have to manage. He had not planned for the third kind. Some of it, he said. Not all. The full account is, it's somewhere I can't yet reach. But I have enough to start, and I know where the rest is buried. Then here's my terms, and I'll have them said plain, since you set such store by plain. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist once, and was done crying for the night. I'll sign your draft. I'll wake your minister. I'll put my name in your register before dawn and do whatever a wife does in the eyes of the law to make it stick, and Caldwell's men can find a clean house in the morning and choke on it." But not to be saved. She stepped toward him, and there was iron in her, now that had nothing to do with the poker on the floor. "I've had my fill of being a thing men decide the worth of. You said I'm worth more than I've been allowed to know. Fine. Then I'll find out what I'm worth, and I'll find out who put my father in that bed, and I'll find out why a man with your kind of money rode through the rain to a dying farmer's door, and you, Mr. Ashford, are going to help me, because that's my price, and it's higher than your draft. You want my name on your paper, then I want the truth on mine. All of it. Every last coin and every last lie. We marry, but I'm not your rescued girl. I'm your partner in this, or I'm nothing in it at all. Now, do we have a bargain, or do you ride back to wherever you came from and let the morning take us both?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Then Nathaniel Ashford did something she had not expected, and would turn over in her mind for a long time after. He set down his hat. He stepped forward, and he held out his hand to her plain and open the way men do when the words have run out and only the grip is left to seal a thing. "Miss Carter," he said, "I came here tonight expecting to save a stranger. I think instead I've found a partner. We have a bargain. God help us both, and God help the men who didn't see you coming." She took his hand. His grip was warm and sure, and gave away nothing it did not choose to, and somewhere underneath it, she felt the first faint thread of something she was not ready to name, and would not name for a long time yet. Behind them on the cot, Thomas Carter let out a long, slow breath that did not draw back in for several seconds, and then mercifully did. Not gone. Not yet. Just sleeping finally the way a man sleeps when the weight he's carried for years has at last been set down by hands other than his own. Abigail looked at the draft on the table, at the wax seal, at the clean, terrible number on the small sheet beside it, at the stranger whose hand was still around hers. "Wake your minister," she said, "and on the way you can start telling me everything, the whole of it, from the beginning." Not everything. His grip tightened, just slightly, just once. "Some of it your father made me swear to keep, and some of it, Abigail, some of it you'd not survive hearing tonight on this floor with him still breathing in that corner. But the rest, yes. As much as a wedding ride will hold." "Then we'd best ride slow," she said, "because I mean to hear it all before that sun comes up. Every coin, every lie, every name." She reached for her shawl. She kissed her father's forehead and whispered something against it that the stranger could not hear and did not try to. And then Abigail Carter, who had woken that morning a ruined girl in a falling house with a stone in her mouth and a debt on her head and a father in the ground by week's end, pulled the door open. On the rain, lifted her chin, and stepped out into a night that no longer belonged to the men who thought they owned her. She did not look back at the house. She was already looking at what came next. The wedding ride was slower than Nathaniel wanted, and faster than Abigail needed, and she spent every yard of it watching his face for the lie. "You said you'd start at the beginning," she said. "We're a mile gone, and you've said nothing but the names of the horses. I'm deciding where the beginning is. It's wherever my father knew you. Start there." His hands tightened on the reins. "Your father knew my father. That's not a beginning. That's a fact dressed up to look like one." A short sound left him not quite a laugh. "You don't give a man room, do you? I gave my father room for 23 years. Look where it landed him." She pulled the shawl tighter. "Your father. Go on." "My father was a land surveyor. A good one. The best between Boston and the Carolinas when it came to where one man's claim ended and another's began." He kept his eyes on the dark road. 20 years ago, a great deal of money was made in this country redrawing those lines. A line moved 2 inches on a map could move a fortune from one family to another. And the men who moved them, the men who decided which line was true, those men became the most dangerous men alive. And your father moved lines. My father refused to. Flat. Final. That's the part that matters. He was hired by Caldwell's people to certify a survey he knew was false. Land that belonged to a dozen small holders, redrawn, so it belonged to one. He refused to sign, and 6 weeks later, he was dead in a river, and the survey was certified anyway, in a hand that looked like his and wasn't. Abigail said nothing for a moment. The horse's hooves filled the quiet. "My father," she said slowly. "Where does my father sit in this? Your father witnessed the true survey, before it was changed." Nathaniel finally looked at her. Thomas Carter was the man who held the chain. The surveyor's assistant holds the measuring chain. He walks every foot of the line. There is no man alive who knows where the true line ran better than the one who walked it. My father wrote it down. Your father walked it. And when my father died and the lie was certified, there was exactly one man left breathing who could stand up and say it was a lie. My pa? Your pa? She felt the cold of it settle into her chest. So Caldwell didn't ruin him by accident. Caldwell spent 20 years burying your father so deep in debt that no court would ever believe a word he said. A bankrupt, drunk farmer's testimony is worth nothing. A respectable man's testimony could hang half of New England's banking houses. His jaw worked. They didn't kill him, Abigail. That's the cruelty of it. Killing him would have raised questions. They just made him poor, year after year, until the one man who could undo the greatest land fraud in the state was too busy starving to ever speak. The carriage hit a rut, and she gripped the rail and did not feel it. How long have you known this? 3 years. 3 years. Her head turned sharp. 3 years you knew my father was being buried alive by liars, and you let it go on. I didn't know it was your father until 4 months ago. His voice didn't rise, but something hardened in it. I knew there was a witness, a chain man, a name half burned out of the records Caldwell thought he'd destroyed. It took me 3 years and more money than I'll ever see again to put a name to that ghost. And when I finally did, Thomas Carter, a farmer on a dying patch of land with a daughter and a debt, the debt was already 11 days from taking everything. His knuckles were white on the reins. I didn't let it go on Miss Carter. I got there as fast as a man can move when the men he's fighting own the roads. She studied him in the dark. And the marriage, where does that fit? A man who only wanted my father's testimony doesn't need a wife. For the first time he hesitated. Answer me. Because a dead man can't testify, he said. And your father is dying, Abigail. We both know it. He'll not live to stand in any court. The testimony I needed, it died on that cot the moment the fever took his strength. He looked at her, and there was something raw in it now. But the chain man's records passed to his kin. His papers, his standing, his right to bring the claim. A daughter who carries his name and his blood and his knowledge, a married woman with a husband of means to fund the fight and a clean house. Caldwell can't seize that daughter, can do what her father never could. So you married the heir, she said, bitterly. Not the girl, the heir. I came for the heir, he agreed. I'll not lie to you now and call it something prettier. I came up that road for what you carried, not for you. He paused. But I've sat in your house an hour, and I've watched you take a stranger's worst news standing up with iron in your hand. And I've heard you turn a rescue into a partnership before the ink was dry. So I'll say this once, and then we'll let it lie till you're ready to hear it again. He looked back to the road. I came for the heir. I don't think it's the heir I'll be riding home with. She didn't answer that. She couldn't. The thread she'd felt back in the house when his hand closed on hers tightened, and she hated it because there was no room in a night like this for a thread like that. Reverend Whitlock, she said instead, does he know what he's blessing? He knows a man of means is paying off a family's debt and taking a wife in the doing. He doesn't know the rest. He doesn't need to. And after, when it's signed, what then? Then we go to the estate. Tonight, what's left of it. And in the morning, he stopped. In the morning what? In the morning, Caldwell's men ride up to your father's house to seize it, and they find the debt paid, and the deed clean, and a marriage on the register, and they go back to Caldwell with the worst news he's had in 20 years. A grim satisfaction crossed his face. That the chain man's daughter just married into the one family in New England with enough money and enough reason to want his head. He'll come for us. He'll come for us, Nathaniel agreed. He'll have to. We've just become the only thing in the world he can't afford to let live free. He glanced at her. Still want the partnership, Miss Carter? You can still take the draft and the clean house and send me on my way. You'd be poor and safe. Sign with me and you'll be neither poor nor safe. You'll be hunted. She thought of her father's face. You're the only one of us they were never clever enough to be afraid of. Yet. Drive faster, she said. I'd like to be married before I lose my nerve, and I'd hate to give Caldwell the satisfaction. The chapel was a single room with a single lamp, and Reverend Whitlock met them at the door, already dressed, a man too tired and too well paid to ask the questions his eyes were asking. This is the bride, he said. This is the bride, Nathaniel said, and she's of age and willing and not under duress. The Reverend looked at her directly when he said it, and she understood it was the one honest moment the night would give her, and that he was a better man than the hour required. I'm of age, Abigail said. I'm willing. She held his eye. And I'm under more duress than you've ever seen, Reverend, but not the kind your question means. I'm choosing this, with my eyes open and my father's blessing. Marry us. Whitlock studied her another moment. Then he nodded and opened his book. It was the shortest wedding either of them would ever attend. There were no flowers and no guests, and no music, but the rain on the roof. And when Whitlock asked for the ring, Nathaniel produced one she hadn't expected. Old worn, a woman's band that had clearly belonged to someone before her. Whose is this? She whispered while the Reverend turned a page. My mother's. You brought your mother's ring to marry a stranger for her testimony. I brought the only ring I owned. His jaw set. Take it or don't. We've 4 minutes before the candle gutters, and I'd as soon be married in the light. She took it. When Whitlock said the words that made them man and wife, neither of them smiled. Nathaniel slid the ring onto her finger, and his hand was steady, and hers was not. And she looked down at the worn gold band on her work-roughened hand, and felt the full weight of what she'd done land all at once. Married. To a man she'd known 3 hours. With a dying father in a house she'd never sleep in again, and a name now that men would hunt. You may, Whitlock began, and stopped reading the room. It's done. Sign the register. They signed. Abigail Carter wrote her name for the last time, and beneath it, Abigail Ashford, and the two names sitting one atop the other looked to her like a door closing and another opening in the same breath. There's one more thing, Nathaniel said as Whitlock blotted the ink. I'll need it witnessed and dated tonight before any man can claim otherwise. He drew a second document from his coat, not the draft, something else dense with writing. Reverend, your signature here as witness to the date and hour. What is it? Abigail said. Your protection. He held it out to her. Read it. I'll not have you sign a thing you haven't read, not after the night you've had, but read it quick, the candle won't wait. She read. It was a settlement. A marriage settlement, the kind grand families drew up, except that every line of it ran the wrong way. It didn't bind her property to him. It bound his to her. The house her father had lost, bought clear, and deeded in her name alone. A sum settled on her separate that no husband's debt or death could touch. And a clause near the bottom in plainer language than the rest, as if he'd written it himself in a hurry, that should the marriage end by any cause, she kept everything and he kept nothing, and she owed no explanation to any court or man. She read it twice. This gives me everything, she said. If you'd wanted to use me and discard me, you'd have written it the other way round. Every man writes it the other way round. I'm aware. So why? He was quiet a moment. The candle hissed. Because your father made me a poor man's son into a rich man, he said finally, and I watched what rich men do to people they hold the strings of. I've spent my whole life being the boy whose father wouldn't sign the lie. I'll not turn into the men who killed him over a girl who married me to save her family. He pushed the paper an inch closer. You wanted a partner, not a rescue. A partner can walk away. So I'm making sure you always can. Sign it or don't. But I'd rather you knew, going in, that the doors never locked on your side. She signed it. So did he. So did Whitlock, who blotted it and dated it and said very quietly, "I've married 300 couples, son. I never saw a man sign half his fortune to a wife he met that morning. Whatever you're running from, I hope she's worth it." "She's worth more than the fortune," Nathaniel said. "That's rather the trouble." They rode the last stretch in a silence that was different from the first. Not easier, but different. She kept catching herself looking at the ring. "Your mother," she said. "Is she? Gone. Long since." "And your father, the surveyor, after the river?" "I was 9. He said it without weight, which told her exactly how much weight it carried. "I was raised by my father's brother, Victor." The name sat there. "Victor Ashford," she said slowly. "The uncle. You said the name in the house listing the men who'd come for us. Victor Ashford, Edmund, Pierce, Elias Caldwell, and—" she frowned, reaching for it. "A woman. Vivian." He didn't answer. "Nathaniel." She turned full toward him. "You listed your own uncle among the men who'll come for us. The man who raised you. Why?" The silence stretched too long. "Because the money my father refused to make," Nathaniel said at last, "my uncle made, all of it. Victor Ashford took the fortune my father died refusing to touch, and he built the dynasty I'm the heir to on the exact crime my father wouldn't sign." His voice was very flat now, very controlled, and she understood that flatness was the most dangerous thing about him. "I'm not bringing you to a family that wronged your father, Abigail. I'm bringing you to the family that wronged my father. The estate I'm taking you to was built with the money that buried Thomas Carter. Victor's money. Caldwell handled the debts. Pierce drew the papers. And Vivian." He stopped. "And Vivian. Vivian Carlyle has been promised to me since I was 12, he said. By Victor. To keep the fortune in hands he trusts. She believes everyone believes that we'll marry come autumn and join the 2 largest land fortunes in the state." He looked at her. "Except I just married a chainman's daughter in a chapel in the rain. And by morning Vivian Carlyle is going to know it. So is Victor. So is Caldwell. So is Pierce." The full shape of it landed on her at once, cold and complete. "You didn't just marry me to fight Caldwell," she breathed. "You married me to break your own family." "I married you," Nathaniel said, "because you're the one weapon Victor never imagined could exist. The witness's heir lawfully wed sitting at his own table, holding the one true account in the state. He spent 20 years making sure your father could never speak. He never once thought to wonder whether the chain man had a daughter." His mouth was a hard line. "And he certainly never thought she'd be sleeping under his roof by morning, with my name on her and the law on her side, and a settlement that no man in this country can break." "You've started a war." "No, Abigail." The estate's gates were coming into view now, vast iron, the first he'd let her see of the world she'd married into. 20 years ago, they started a war on a surveyor who wouldn't lie, and a chain man who knew the truth. I'm just the first one of us in 20 years who's been in any position to fight back. He slowed the horse. "And now so are you." The gates were higher than her father's house. She stared up at them as they passed beneath, and the scale of it, the sheer scale, pressed the breath out of her. "You said the estate was what's left of it. Left of what?" "Left of mine." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Victor controls the bulk of the fortune until I marry to his satisfaction. Marry Vivian, and it's all mine. Marry anyone else. And you lose it. And I lose most of it. Tonight, I'm worth a great deal less than I was this morning." He almost smiled. "I spent half of what's freely mine paying your father's debts and settling the rest on you. By tomorrow, when Victor learns what I've done, he'll move to lock down every cent he can reach. We'll have the house, the settled sum, each other, and one true account that can bring the whole thing down." He brought the horse to a stop in the great dark courtyard. "It's less than I had this morning. It's more than enough to terrify them. Marie, a man came out to take the horse, old stooped lantern in hand. He looked at Nathaniel, and then at the woman beside him, and then at the worn gold ring on her finger, and something flickered across his weathered face. "Master Nathaniel," the old man said carefully. "We weren't told to expect, that is. The household—" "This is my wife, Samuel." Nathaniel stepped down and turned to hand Abigail from the carriage. "Mrs. Ashford, we were married tonight." The old man's lantern wavered. "Married? Tonight?" His eyes went to the ring again. "Sir, forgive me, sir. That's the late mistress's band, your mother's. We thought it lost when—" "It wasn't lost. I kept it." Nathaniel's hand stayed steady under Abigail's. "Wake the housekeeper. Have a room made up the eastern rooms, not the family wing. And Samuel." His voice dropped. "Not a word past these walls tonight. Not to the village, not to the post, not to anyone who rides for my uncle. Do you understand me?" The old man held his master's eye a long moment. Then slowly he did something that made the hair rise on Abigail's arms. He bowed, not the bob of a servant to a guest, but a deep formal bow, the kind owed to something far above a farmer's daughter. "Welcome home, your grace," Samuel said. To her. Abigail went still. "Samuel," Nathaniel said sharply. But the old man straightened, and there were tears standing in his old eyes, and he spoke past Nathaniel directly to her, the way a man speaks who has waited a long time to say a thing. "Your pardon, ma'am. Your pardon. It's only I serve the master's father. The real master. The one who wouldn't sign." His voice shook. "And I've watched this house grow rich on the back of what that good man died refusing to do, and I've held my tongue 20 years for fear of the river they put him in. And now the young master rides in at near dawn with a wife on his arm and his mother's ring on her hand, and that look on his face, the same look the old master had the last week before they—" He stopped himself, swallowed. "Whatever you've come to do, ma'am, whatever the both of you have come to do, there's more in this house been praying for it than you'd ever credit. That's all. That's all an old man's got to say." The courtyard was silent. Abigail looked at the old servant, then at her husband, whose careful, controlled face had cracked clean open at the words. The old master had the same look, and for the first time she saw not a man with a plan, but a boy who'd been 9 years old when they pulled his father from a river, and who had carried it every single day since, and who had just discovered he was not as alone in carrying it as he'd believed. "What's your name again?" she said gently to the old man. "Samuel." "Samuel, ma'am. 41 years in this house come the harvest." "Then you knew the man who walked the chain?" "My father. Thomas Carter." The lantern dropped a full inch. "Carter?" the old man whispered. "The chain man. Master Edward's chain man." His face worked. You're Tom Carter's girl." "I am. Lord above." Samuel sat down hard on the mounting block lantern, and all as if his legs had simply quit. "Lord above, after all this time, the surveyor's son and the chain man's daughter, married, under this roof." He pressed a shaking hand to his mouth. "They thought they buried it. 20 years they thought they buried the whole of it. And it walked right back in the front gate holding hands." "Samuel," Nathaniel said more gently now. "The room, and your silence. Both. Can I trust you?" The old man got to his feet. He scrubbed his eyes with the back of his sleeve and drew himself up, and for a moment Abigail saw the man he must have been 41 years ago. "Sir," Samuel said, "you could cut my tongue out before I'd carry one word of this to your uncle. I've waited 20 years to be on the right side of something in this house. I'll not waste it now." He lifted the lantern. "Eastern rooms, made up warm, and not a soul the wiser till you say. This way, ma'am. Mind the step the stone's worn, where the old master used to pace." He led them in. The house swallowed them. Abigail walked through halls taller than her father's barn, past doors she'd never open, and portraits of faces she'd never know, and the whole way she held to one thought, the way her father had taught her to hold a chain. Taught true. Never let it drag. "This is the house that buried my father, and I just walked in the front door as its mistress." Samuel left them into the eastern rooms with a fresh lit fire and a murmured good night, and one last look at the ring before he closed the door. And then, for the first time since a fist had knocked 3 even times on her broken farmhouse door, Abigail Ashford was alone with her husband and the enormity of what they'd done. "Your Grace," she said. "He called me, Your Grace. He shouldn't have." Nathaniel set his hat down. "I'm not a duke. There are no dukes here. This is America." A pause. "But the family's styled itself that way among the servants for 30 years. Victor likes it, likes the sound of it, likes the bowing." His mouth twisted. "It's a lie like everything else they own. But you'll hear it. Best you don't flinch when you do." I flinched. "You won't next time." He looked at her across the fire. "You didn't flinch at a sealed draft or a forged number or a wedding in the rain. You'll learn not to flinch at a borrowed title from an old man who meant it as a blessing." She crossed to the window, though there was nothing to see but dark, and she stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, the ring catching the firelight. "My pa's going to die in that house tonight or tomorrow," she said. "Alone, while I sleep in the one his enemies built. He's not alone. I left 2 of my own people there before I ever knocked on your door. A nurse and a man to keep the road. Whatever comes, he'll not be alone. And he'll not be put out in the morning, because the house is paid and clean and yours." Nathaniel's voice was quiet. "I couldn't give him his life back, Abigail. I came too late for that. But I could see to it he dies a free man in a house that owes nothing with his debts dead before him instead of after. It's not enough. I know it's not enough." She turned. "Why does it matter to you? So much. He's a stranger to you, a name in a burned record 4 months gone." "Because my father held the pen and yours held the chain," Nathaniel said, "and they were the only 2 men in the whole rotten business who wouldn't lie. And mine's been 20 years in a river, and yours is 20 years in a debt, and I'm so tired." His voice caught the first crack she'd heard all night that wasn't calculated. "I'm so tired of the honest men being the only ones who pay. That's why it matters. Because somebody finally ought to make the liars pay instead. And tonight, God help me, it turns out the somebody is a chainman's daughter and a surveyor's son, married in the rain with half a fortune and a true account, and not the faintest idea if we'll live out the season." The fire cracked between them. "We'll live out the season," Abigail said. "I didn't bury a stone in my mouth for 11 days to die in a feather bed 3 days after I learned why." A sound came out of him, surprised almost a laugh, the realest thing he'd done all night. "No," he agreed. "No, I don't suppose you did." There came a knock, not Samuel's. 3 knocks, but uneven, hurried the knock of someone who'd run. Nathaniel was at the door before she could speak, and he didn't open it wide. "Master Nathaniel?" A young voice, breathless low, a stable boy by the dirt on him. "Sir. Beg pardon, sir, but Samuel said come quick and quiet. There's a rider come up the south road not 10 minutes past. Stopped at the gate, asked the night man was the young master home, and was it true he'd ridden out toward the Carter farm tonight." Abigail's blood went cold. "Who?" Nathaniel said. "Whose rider?" The boy swallowed. "Mr. Pierce's, sir. Edmund Pierce, the lawyer." He glanced back over his shoulder into the dark hall. "Nightman said he knew nothing and sent him off. But Sir Mr. Pierce don't send a rider at near dawn to ask after nothing. And the man asked particular. Asked was the young master alone when he rode out, or did he come back with someone?" The fire popped. Nathaniel and Abigail looked at each other across the room, and the same thought passed between them without a word. They knew faster than we believed they could. Before the ink on the register was dry. Before her father had drawn his last. Before she'd so much as sat down in the house she'd married into. "They don't know," Abigail said quietly. "Not yet. They suspect. There's a difference, and we've maybe a few hours of it. Less." Nathaniel turned to the boy. "You've done well. Tell Samuel to bar the south gate and let no rider pass tonight on any errand from any man. And then both of you sleep, and you saw nothing, and you carried no message. Go." The boy went. Nathaniel shut the door and stood with his hand flat against it for a moment. Then he turned, and the careful mask was gone entirely now, and what was underneath was harder and clearer and somehow younger. "They're already moving," he said. "Pierce wouldn't send a man at this hour unless Caldwell stirred him, and Caldwell wouldn't stir unless something spooked him at the Carter farm. Which means the men coming to seize your father's house in a few hours have already sent word back that the debt's been paid by an outside hand." He pressed the heel of his palm to his eyes. "I thought we'd have till the register reached the county. I thought we'd have a week. We've got till they put it together. A paid debt, a missing draft, and a young master who rode to the chainman's farm in the rain and came back with a wife." "How long is that?" "Pierce is the cleverest of the lot, cleverer than Victor, cleverer than Caldwell." He dropped his hand. "He'll have it by noon." Abigail walked to the table where Samuel had left a pitcher and a single cup. She poured water with a hand that she noted with some distant pride had finally stopped shaking. She drank. She set the cup down. "Then we've got till noon," she said, "to decide what we are when they come. Beggars who got lucky, or the two people who are going to take this whole family apart." She looked at her husband. "I know which one my pa would want. The question is which one you've got the stomach for, Mr. Ashford. Because I'll tell you now, I buried being safe back on that farmhouse floor. I've got nothing left to lose but the truth, and I mean to spend it." Nathaniel Ashford looked at the chainman's daughter standing by the fire in his dead mother's ring, in the house his uncle built on her father's ruin with dawn coming, and Pierce's rider already turned back toward the men who'd want them both gone. "Get some sleep," he said. "Both of us. An hour, maybe two. It's all we'll get." He moved to the door, then stopped with his hand on the latch and didn't turn around. "And Abigail, for what it's worth. My father held the pen and wouldn't lie, and they killed him for it. Your father held the chain and knew the truth, and they buried him for it." His knuckles whitened on the latch. "I don't intend for us to be the third and fourth, so yes, I've got the stomach for it. I've had the stomach for it for 20 years. I was only ever missing the one thing." "What thing?" He looked back at her then, just once over his shoulder. "Someone who knew where the line truly ran," he said. "Good night, Mrs. Ashford. Bar your door. We'll know more by noon than either of us may want to." And he was gone into the dark hall, and Abigail Ashford stood alone in the firelight in the house that had buried her father, turning her mother-in-law's ring on her finger, listening to a great strange house settle around her, and a clock somewhere below strike the hour before dawn, counting already the hours until noon. She did not sleep. She sat by the window with her father's notice folded in her lap and her mother-in-law's ring on her hand, and when the first gray bled into the dark, she was already dressed and waiting. Samuel came at the turn of the hour with a tray she didn't touch and a face that told her something before he opened his mouth. "Word came up the back way," he said, "from the Carter Road. The man the master left to keep the house, he sent a boy on foot all night walking. My father." She was on her feet. "Still with us, ma'am, as of midnight." Samuel set the tray down. But the seizure men came at first light, just as the notice said. Found the debt paid, the deed clean. The both of them sat there with nothing to take. A grim satisfaction crossed his old face, and then faded. They didn't argue it. That's the thing the boy was sent to say. They didn't bluster, didn't threaten, didn't send for a magistrate. They looked at the paid papers, and they turned their horses, and they rode straight back the way they came. Quiet, in a hurry. "That's good, isn't it? They left him alone." "No, ma'am." Samuel shook his head slowly. "Men sent to throw a sick man into the road don't go quiet when they're cheated of it. They go loud. They go to the magistrate. They make trouble." He picked at the edge of the tray. "Men who go quiet are men who've been told to find a thing out and report it, not collect it. They came to see who paid. They saw, and they ran to tell." The fear that had been sitting in her chest since the stable boy's knock turned over. "Then they know," she said. "They know somebody with money paid Tom Carter's debt in the night. They'll guess the rest by noon, same as the master said. Samuel hesitated. Ma'am, there's the other thing. Why I came up myself instead of sending a girl. Say it. The master's not in his rooms. Hasn't been since before dawn. The old man lowered his voice. He rode out, ma'am. Alone. Left word with the night man he'd be back by midday and not before, and not to wake you and not to tell a soul which way he went. Samuel's jaw worked. I've served this house 41 years. The young master doesn't ride out alone before dawn the morning after he's done a thing this dangerous. Not unless he's gone to face it head on before it can come to him. Abigail went very still. Face what? I don't know, ma'am. Where would he go? If he meant to get ahead of it, before they put it together. She crossed to the old man. Think, Samuel. You know this house better than he does. Where does a man ride to face a thing before noon? The lantern light memory crossed Samuel's face, and his color changed. There's only one place worth getting ahead of, he said slowly. The county clerk's office, where the marriage register goes. And where, he swallowed, where the old land records sit. The certified survey, the one they forged. If the master meant to get ahead of Pierce, he'd go to the records before Pierce could think to pull them and see what's there to be seen. Then I'm going after him. Ma'am. Samuel. She was already reaching for her shawl. I sat in a chair all night waiting to be told things. I'm done with that. My father walked that line. My name's on those records now, both of them, the marriage and the blood. If there's a thing in that clerk's office that touches my paw, I've a right to stand over it, and I'll not have my husband ride into it alone the morning after he hung half a fortune on my finger. She wrapped the shawl. How far is the county seat? An hour's ride. But ma'am, you don't know the road, you don't know the town, you don't know who in it carries water for your uncle. Then you'll come with me, and you'll teach me on the way. Samuel looked at her for a long moment, and then, for the second time, the old man bowed, not the formal bow of the courtyard, but a small one, a private one, the bow of a man choosing a side. I'll have the gig brought round the back, he said. Quiet. Eat first, ma'am. You've a long day coming, and you've put nothing in your stomach since yesterday. The dead can't fight liars, and neither can the fainting. She ate. Then they rode. The county seat was waking when they came into it, and Samuel took the gig down a side lane and tied it where it wouldn't be marked, and he walked her to the clerk's office by a route that kept them off the main square. There, he murmured. The brick building. Master's horse is there, the gray C at the rail. He's inside. And ma'am. His grip caught her arm. There's a second horse beside it. The black with the silver on the bridle. His face had gone grave. That's Mr. Pierce's horse. The lawyer. They're both inside. Together. Abigail's stomach dropped. Then we're too late. Pierce got ahead of him. Or he got ahead of Pierce and Pierce followed. Samuel's hand tightened. Either way, ma'am, you can't walk in. If Pierce sees the chainman's daughter and the young master in a clerk's office over the old survey, you've handed him the whole thing wrapped in ribbon. He'll know in a glance. Then he won't see the chainman's daughter. She pulled the shawl up over her hair the way the village women did, and dropped her shoulders, and let her face go dull and tired, the way a serving woman's would. He'll see a girl come to fetch papers for her mistress. Wait here. If I'm not out in a quarter-hour ride for the house and bar it. Ma'am? But she was already crossing the lane. The clerk's office was a low room of high shelves and dust, and she came through the door with her eyes down and a maid's bob, and she heard the two men before she saw them, their voices low and tight at the far counter. A perfectly ordinary inquiry, Pierce. Nathaniel's voice smooth bored the voice of a man pretending hard to be casual. I'm reviewing the family's holdings ahead of the autumn settlement. My uncle would expect no less. At dawn? A second voice, dry precise, every word set down like a coin on a counter. This was Pierce. You wrote an hour at dawn to review holdings you'll inherit in a season regardless. Forgive me, Nathaniel. You've never once in your life risen before 9 to look at a ledger. People change. People don't. A pause. What were you doing on the Carter Road last night? The silence stretched. Abigail bent over a low shelf with her back to them, did not breathe. "I don't know what road you mean," Nathaniel said. "A man of mine saw your gray on the South Fork past midnight, headed toward the old Carter holding." The coin voice never rose. "And this morning Caldwell's seizure men find the Carter debt, a debt 20 years in the growing, paid in full overnight by a draft drawn on a house of business in Boston. A draft, Nathaniel, of a size that very few men in this state could write." A beat. "You're one of them. Caldwell's debts are Caldwell's business, not mine." "No, they're my business. I drew half the papers on them." The sound of a page turning. "Which is how I know precisely how large the Carter debt was, and precisely how impossible it is that it was paid by accident or charity. Someone wanted that family clear of Caldwell's hold very badly and very suddenly, and paid a fortune to do it in a single night." Another page. "So I'll ask you a third time, and then I'll stop asking and start telling Victor. What were you doing on the Carter Road?" Abigail's hand had found a thick bound volume on the shelf. The spine faded, read in a clerk's hand. Surveys certified and a span of years. The forged record, right there, within her reach. She slid it half an inch toward herself, silent. "I'll tell you what I was doing," Nathaniel said, and his voice had changed, dropped the bored drawl, gone low and even, and Abigail froze with the volume half drawn because she didn't know what he was about to do. "I was doing exactly what you think I was doing, Edmund. I paid the Carter debt." The silence rang. "I see," Pierce said softly. "You don't yet, but you will. So let me save us both the morning." A chair scraped. "I paid it because I've grown sentimental in my old age about the families this house ruined on its way up. Carter was one of them. I came across the name reviewing the old accounts the way an heir does. A farmer sick, dying, about to be put in the road over a 20-year debt for the crime of being poor near Caldwell. I paid it. Call it conscience. Call it a rich man's whim. Victor can dock it from my settlement and lecture me on charity, and I'll bear it." A pause. "That's the whole of it. One debt, one dying farmer, one attack of conscience. Tell Victor what you like." Abigail understood, listening, exactly what he was doing. He was giving Pierce a true thing, the paid debt undeniable wrapped around a lie. Sentiment. Charity. A whim. Anything but the marriage. Anything but the chain. He was betting the whole game on Pierce not yet knowing about the register and spending the smaller secret to bury the larger one. It was clever. It was very clever, and she could tell from the silence that it wasn't working. "A man of conscience," Pierce said at last, "paying a stranger's debt out of pity." A dry sound, almost a laugh. "Do you know, Nathaniel, I might have believed that of you. You were always the soft one, Edward's son through and through. The pity I'd believe." The coin voice sharpened to an edge. "What I don't believe is the size of it. You don't pay a 20-year compounding debt to spare a dying man 3 days of discomfort. He'll be dead within the week, regardless, you said so yourself. He's dying. Pity buys a man a doctor, a soft bed, a quiet end. It does not buy a clean deed and a clear title that outlives him." A page turned slow. "You didn't pay to ease his death, Nathaniel. You paid to preserve something, something that survives him, something that passes to whoever he leaves behind." The smallest pause. "Does Thomas Carter leave anyone behind?" The trap closed so neatly that Abigail felt it in her own chest. She gripped the volume. "I wouldn't know," Nathaniel said, too quickly. "You paid his debts and don't know his family. I paid a ledger entry. I didn't court the man." The sound of Pierce gathering his coat. "Then you'll not mind my pulling the Carter file myself. And the marriage register. I find when a rich young man does an inexplicable thing the same night he rides to a dying man's house, the explanation generally sits in a register somewhere." Footsteps toward the very counter behind which the clerk's record books were shelved. Toward her. "Clerk, the marriage book. The recent entries. It ain't been brought current, sir." Abigail heard her own voice come out of her, dull and flat and weary, the voice of a maid who'd been waiting too long. She kept her back half turned, her face shadowed in the shawl, and held up a different volume entirely, a thick parish thing she'd grabbed blind off the shelf. Clerk's gone to the back for his breakfast and left me to mind it. The recent book's not here, sir. Took to the binders day before yesterday. Won't be back till week's end. She bobbed. If it's a marriage you're after, you'd best come back Friday or write the binder in town. She felt Pierce's attention land on her like a cold hand. And who are you? He said. Polly, sir. I do for the clerk's wife. Wait on the office when he steps out. She bobbed again lower and kept her eyes on the floorboards and prayed her hands weren't shaking visibly. Friday, sir. Or the binder. I'm sorry I can't help you sooner. A pause that lasted a year. The binders, Pierce repeated. Yes, sir. Mr. Hollis, sir, on the square. She picked the only binder's name Samuel had mentioned on the ride in a thread of a chance. Day before yesterday. Another pause. Then mercifully, the cold attention slid off her. How tiresome, Pierce said. Very well. Friday. His footsteps moved toward the door, then stopped. Nathaniel. A word of counsel, freely given for old times. Whatever you've done, and you've done something I've known you since you were a boy, and you've never once lied to me, well, undo it. Quietly. Before Victor smells it, the way I'm smelling it now. Your uncle has spent 20 years making certain this family has no loose threads. He will not thank the nephew who hands him one in the season he's meant to wed and inherit. The door creaked. Friday, then. Give my regards to Vivian. She asks after you. She's planning the autumn quite happily, the poor creature. It would be a kindness not to make a fool of her in public. The door shut. A horse moved off outside. The office held its breath. Then Nathaniel let out a long, slow exhale, and Abigail straightened from the shelf. The survey's certified volume still clutched against her, and pushed the shawl back from her face. He turned at the movement. And the look on his face when he saw her standing there in the clerk's office in a maid's shawl, holding the forged record against her chest, went through three things. In half a second, shock, fury, and something else underneath that, she'd have called fear if she hadn't known better. Tell me, he said very quietly, crossing to her in 3 strides, that you have not been standing in this room the whole of that. Polly does for the clerk's wife, she said. I'd have thought a man who lies as poorly as Mr. Pierce says you do would be grateful one of us can do it. Abigail. He took her by the arms, low and urgent. If he had seen your face, if he had placed you, he didn't. Because he wasn't looking for a maid, he was looking for a wife, and I gave him a maid. She pulled back enough to hold his eye. You spent the smaller secret to save the larger one. The debt to bury the marriage. It was good. It nearly worked. It didn't work because Pierce is cleverer than the lie you told, and you knew it would only buy hours, which is why you came here at dawn to get to the records before he did. She held up the volume. This is it, isn't it? The certified survey, the forged one. His eyes dropped to the book, then back to her. How did you? It says surveys certified on the spine, and the years match what you told me on the ride. I can read Mr. Ashford. My father saw to that, whatever else he couldn't give me. She set it on the counter. Pierce is going to come back Friday for the marriage register, find it's not at any binders, and know the maid lied to him. We've got till Friday before he knows for certain there's a marriage, and an hour, maybe before the real clerk comes back from his breakfast. So we'd best look at this now together while we can. She opened the cover. Show me where they moved the line. For a moment, he didn't move. He looked at her, really looked the way he had in the farmhouse, the look of a man revising every estimate he'd made, and then something in him gave way, and he came to stand beside her at the counter and turned the heavy pages until he found it. There, he said. His finger came down on a page dense with figures and a surveyor's signature at the foot. That's the certified line, the one that took 12 families' land and gave it to one. And that, his finger moved to the signature, that's my father's name. Edward Ashford, surveyor, certified, sworn, dated. His voice went rough. 6 weeks after they pulled him out of the river. He signed a survey 6 weeks after he died, Abigail. That's the forgery. That's the whole crime in one signature. My father certified this line from the bottom of a river. She bent over the page. She looked at the dead man's signature and the figures above it, and she felt her father's voice rise up in her, out of years of half-heard talk over winter fires. The talk of a man who'd walked lines for a living, who measured the world in chains and rods and bearings, who'd taught his daughter to read a survey the way other fathers taught their daughters to read scripture because it was the only book he owned worth teaching. "This bearing's wrong," she said. Nathaniel went still. "What?" "This one. Here." Her finger came down beside his. "The line runs from the white oak at the creek. They've marked the white oak, see the witness tree, and it bears north by northeast to the boundary stone. But the distance is wrong." She frowned, reading it the way her father had taught her, lips moving. "It says the white oak to the stone is 412 rods. It isn't. It can't be." She looked up. "My pa walked that line. I'd swear my life he walked that exact line, because he used to tell it. The white oak at the creek, and the long pull up the rise to the boundary stone. He said it was the hardest chain he ever pulled, because the ground rose so steep he could barely keep the chain level. And he said it was 340 rods near enough, and he cursed every one of them. 340, not 412. She pressed her finger to the page. They added 70 rods to the line. 70 rods of another man's land, moved over to theirs, hidden inside one false distance in one signed survey. And the only way anybody would ever know is if you'd heard a chain man curse that hill at his own fire for 20 years. The clerk's office was utterly silent. Nathaniel was staring at her as if she'd caught fire. "Say that again," he breathed. 340 rods, not 412. My father walked it. I heard him say the number 100 times and never once knew it mattered." Her own voice shook now because she was understanding it as she said it. This is why he had to be buried, Nathaniel. Not just because he held the chain, because he held the number, the true distance. The one thing on this whole forged page that a living man could stand up and swear was wrong from his own 2 feet. They couldn't risk him ever saying it out loud in a room that mattered, so they made sure no room would ever believe a bankrupt drunk. She looked up at him white-faced. "My pa didn't carry a stone in his mouth for 20 years because he was ashamed of his debts. He carried it because he knew the true number, and he knew what it meant, and he knew the day he said it out loud would be the day they put him in the river beside your father." Nathaniel reached out and gripped the edge of the counter as if the floor had moved. 3 years, he said hoarsely. 3 years I've had pieces of this, the forged signature I had, the dead man certifying a survey I had. I knew it was a lie, but I could never prove which line they moved or by how much, because I'm not a surveyor. My father never taught me. I was 9. His voice broke clean through. I had the forgery and no way to show the truth underneath it. And you read it in 2 minutes off a number your father cursed at his own fire. He didn't curse it for nothing then, Abigail said softly. Did he? No. Nathaniel's eyes were bright and hard. He cursed it because he knew. He's been the proof this whole time, and they spent 20 years making certain no one would ever ask him. And now... He stopped. And now he's dying, Abigail finished. And the proof dies with him unless... She stopped too, the same thought arriving in them both at once. Unless it's written, Nathaniel said slowly. Sworn. Set down in his own hand or his mark witnessed before he... He turned to her, and the urgency was a living thing now. A deathbed deposition. A dying man's sworn statement carries weight in any court in the country. They call it a dying declaration, a man with no reason left to lie. If your father will swear the true distance the 340 rods in writing witnessed before he goes, then it doesn't die with him. Then it doesn't die with him. He was already moving, gathering the volume, his coat, his thoughts. We need it written and witnessed, and we need it today, Abigail, because by Friday, Pierce knows there's a marriage, and the moment Victor learns the chain man left a daughter who married into this house, he will move heaven and earth to make certain your father dies before he can swear to anything. They've waited 20 years for this debt to finish him. They will not let the one season they finally have him cornered slip past, because his fool of a daughter married the heir and rode for a clerk's office. The word fool sat between them. "I'm not a fool," Abigail said. "No." He stopped, looked at her, and for the first time the careful distance in him was simply gone, burned off entirely in the heat of what they'd found. "No, Abigail. You're the single most dangerous thing that's happened to this family in 20 years, and I married you for it, and I'm only now understanding what I—" He caught himself, reset his jaw. "We have to go. Now. Back to your father, before they think to stop us." But as they turned for the door, it opened, and a woman stood in it. She was young and fine and dressed for the season in a way that made Abigail's borrowed shawl feel like the rag it was, and she looked at Nathaniel with the easy ownership of someone who had never once in her life been told she could not have a thing she wanted. Then her gaze moved slow and curious to the woman in the maid's shawl, standing far too close to him at the clerk's counter, and the curiosity cooled into something sharper. "Nathaniel," the woman said, "what a strange place to find you. Edmund said you'd ridden out at dawn, and I confess I didn't believe him." Her eyes did not leave Abigail. "He didn't mention you'd brought company, though he did mention a maid who told him the most curious lie about a binder's. Polly wasn't it?" A small, cold smile. "I do hope I'm not interrupting. Won't you introduce me to your maid?" Nathaniel's face had gone perfectly, terribly still. "Vivian," he said, and Abigail standing in a stranger's shawl in a clerk's office in a town she didn't know, holding the proof that could burn a dynasty, looked into the eyes of the woman who'd been promised the man whose ring she now wore, and understood that the few hours she'd counted on had just run out here now, in the worst possible room, in front of the one person who would carry the news straight to Victor Ashford before the morning was done. Vivian Carlyle did not raise her voice. That was the first thing Abigail learned about her, and the most dangerous. "A maid," Vivian said again, stepping into the room, letting the door fall shut behind her. "In your dead mother's ring." The whole room went cold. Abigail's hand was at her side, but the ring was there plain on her finger, and Vivian's eyes had found it the way a hawk finds a field mouse, instantly, completely, with no doubt at all about what came next. "I'd know that band anywhere," Vivian went on, conversational, almost gentle. "Victor showed it to me when I was 16. Said it would be mine when we married. Said it was the only thing of the old mistress's worth keeping." Her gaze rose from the ring to Abigail's face, slow reading every inch of her, the work-roughened hands, the borrowed shawl, the sun-darkened skin of a girl who'd labored. "And now it's on the hand of a farm girl in a clerk's office. So either you've robbed him, Nathaniel, or you've done something a great deal more interesting. Vivian." Nathaniel stepped forward, putting himself half between the two women, and his voice was the careful one again, the bored drawl pulled back on like a coat. "You're tired from the road. Whatever Edmund's told you." "Edmund told me nothing. Edmund never tells me anything. He thinks I'm furniture." A flash of real anger under the smooth surface there, and gone. "I followed him because I'm not a fool, whatever the men in this family have decided. He rode out before light, agitated, in the direction of a town we've no business in, and came back at a gallop, white as a sheet. So I came to see what could frighten Edmund Pierce." Her eyes returned to Abigail. "And here it is. A farm girl in a borrowed shawl wearing a ring. I was promised standing too close to a man I'm to marry in the autumn." The smile again thin as a blade. "Tell me, girl. What's your name? Your real one, not Polly." Abigail looked at her, and in that long moment she weighed every road, the lie, the dodge, the maid's bob, and understood with cold clarity that all of them were already dead. Vivian had seen the ring. There was no shawl in the world that could unsee it, so she did the only thing left that might still buy something. She told the truth, and she chose how. "Abigail," she said. "Abigail Ashford." Vivian's face did not move, but something behind her eyes went very still. "Ashford," she repeated. "We were married last night, by Reverend Whitlock, witnessed and registered." Abigail kept her voice level, kept her chin up the way her father had said be frightened, and do it anyway. "I'm sorry you weren't told. I'm sorry for the whole of how you're learning it." There's no kind way to hear a thing like this, and I'll not insult you by pretending there is." The clerk's office was silent enough to hear the dust settle. "You married her," Vivian said. Not to Abigail, to Nathaniel. And for the first time the smooth surface cracked clean through, and what was underneath wasn't rage. It was something worse, something that had been waiting a long time. "You married a farm girl in the night in secret, while I sat in your uncle's house planning a wedding. Everyone in 3 counties believes is happening. You let me plan it. You let me write to my aunts. You let me choose the—" She stopped herself, jaw tight, and Abigail saw the humiliation land on her like a slap, saw her absorb it, saw her decide in real time not to weep in front of the woman who'd caused it. "Do you have any notion what Victor will do to you, to her, to me for being made a public fool? Vivian. 20 years he's built this, the land, the name, the match. And you've put a torch to all of it in a single night for—" She gestured at Abigail at the shawl at the work-worn hands for this. "There had better be a reason, Nathaniel. There had better be a reason worth my whole life, because that is what you've spent." And here Abigail watched her husband make a choice she would think about for the rest of her days. He told Vivian the truth. Not all of it, not the survey, not the 340 rods, not the deathbed deposition they were racing toward, but the shape of it. "Her father is the chainman," he said quietly. "Edward Ashford's chainman. The one who walked the true line, the one your Victor and Caldwell spent 20 years burying in debt, so he could never speak. I married her because she's the only person alive who can prove what they did to my father, and to a dozen families besides." He held Vivian's eye. "I didn't do it to shame you, Vivian. I swear that to you. I did it because if I'd waited one more day her father would be in the road, and the proof would be gone. There was no time to do it kindly. There was barely time to do it at all." Vivian stared at him. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that the men I was about to marry into that Victor, that Caldwell, that Edmund, that they killed my father and ruined hers?" "Yes." Nathaniel's voice didn't waver. "The fortune you were going to marry Vivian. Every acre of it. It's built on it. You'd have been mistress of land they stole over a dead surveyor and a dozen broken families. I should think you'd want to know that before the autumn, not after." It was a gamble. Abigail saw it for exactly what it was. Nathaniel betting that Vivian Carlyle humiliated Furious, holding the power to destroy them with a single word to Victor, might be more dangerous to their enemies than to them, if she understood what she'd nearly married. It was a gamble made in desperation in a clerk's office, with the minutes running out, and Abigail had no idea which way it would fall. For a long moment, Vivian said nothing. She looked at Nathaniel. She looked at the heavy-bound volume still clutched under his arm, Surveys Certified. And her eyes narrowed at it because she was clever, far cleverer than the men in her life had ever bothered to notice, and she understood at once that a man does not steal a survey book from a county office over an old grief. "That's the proof," she said. "In your arm. That's it." Neither of them answered, which was answer enough. Vivian let out a slow breath. And then she did something neither of them expected. She turned and looked through the window glass to the square outside, scanning it the way a woman scans a room she means to leave by a particular door. "Edmund's gone toward the Carlisle Road," she said. "He'll be at Victor's by noon. He means to tell him you paid the Carter debt, that part he's certain of. He doesn't yet know about the marriage, he only suspects. He's gone to plant the suspicion in Victor's ear so that when the proof comes, he can say he saw it first." Her voice had changed, entirely gone crisp, practical, the voice of a strategist who'd been forced to play furniture her whole life, and had spent every silent hour of it watching how the game was truly played. "Which means you have until Edmund convinces Victor to act. A few hours, no more. And when Victor acts, the first thing he will do, the very first, is send men to make certain the chainman cannot be brought to swear to anything." She turned back. "Your father, girl. They'll go for your father, today." Abigail's blood ran cold. "He's guarded. Nathaniel left men—" 2 men against what Victor will send. Vivian shook her head, almost pitying. You don't understand yet what you've married into. Victor doesn't send 2 men. Victor sends enough that no one ever has to wonder whether it was enough. Then we go now, Nathaniel said, moving for the door. Both of us hard riding ahead of whatever Victor sends. You'll never beat them by riding the road, Vivian said. They'll take the post road. It's faster than your back lanes, and they'll have fresh horses staged. Victor stages horses. It's how he's always a step ahead. She caught Nathaniel's sleeve as he passed. But I know the staging houses, all of them. Victor's used me as a message carrier for years because he thinks a woman delivering a letter raises no eyebrows. I know exactly where his fresh horses wait and exactly which one a rider for the Carter farm would change at. Her chin came up. Foul the staging and Victor's men ride the same tired horses you do. Then it's an even race, and an even race you might win. Abigail and Nathaniel both stared at her. Why? Abigail said. Why would you help us? An hour ago you didn't know we existed, and we've cost you everything you planned. Why? Vivian Carlyle looked at her for a long moment, and the smooth society mask slipped one final time, and what showed beneath it was old and tired and very honest. Because I have spent 11 years being shaped into the perfect wife for a fortune, she said. Schooled, polished, promised, and never once asked. And I have spent every one of those years in rooms where Victor and Edmund and Caldwell spoke freely in front of me, because they believed I was too ornamental to understand. Her jaw tightened. I understood everything. I understood the loans that ruined people. I understood the families that sold their land and were never seen again. I understood what kind of men they were, and I told myself it was the price of the only life I'd been raised to want, and I made myself not see it. She looked at the ring on Abigail's hand, and there was no envy left in it now, only something stripped bare. And then a farm girl in a borrowed shawl walks into a clerk's office holding the proof of all of it, and I find I would rather burn the whole fortune to the ground than spend one more year pretending I didn't know. A thin, real smile. You asked why. That's why. Now stop wasting the hours I'm buying you and tell me where your father is so I know which staging house to foul first. It was Abigail would think later the moment the war truly turned, not in the courtroom that came after, not in any grand reckoning, but in a dusty clerk's office, when the woman they'd most feared chose of her own free will to change sides. They moved fast after that. Vivian took the post road north to foul the staging houses, riding astride and hard. A fine lady doing a thing no fine lady did, and Abigail watched her go and understood she'd badly misjudged the only other woman in the story. Nathaniel and Abigail took the back lanes with Samuel and the gig, pushing the gray and the gig horse as hard as the rough roads allowed, racing toward the Carter farm, and the dying man who held the only number that mattered. If she's lying, Abigail said, gripping the rail as the gig jolted, if she rides straight to Victor instead, then we're already lost, and it costs us nothing to find out, Nathaniel said grimly. But she's not lying. How do you know? Because I saw her face when I said the fortune was built on stolen land. He kept his eyes on the road. I've known Vivian 11 years, Abigail. I've watched her be charming and bored and angry and false. I never once in 11 years saw her face do what it did in that office. That wasn't a woman scheming. That was a woman setting something down she'd been carrying too long. A pause. I know that look. I've worn it. So have you. So has your father. His jaw set. We're not the only people that house broke. We're just the first ones who got to fight back. Today it seems we're not even the only ones fighting. They reached the Carter farm past midday, lathered and shaking, and the man Nathaniel had left to keep the road met them at the gate with a musket and white knuckles. Riders came, he said before they'd even stopped. 3 of 'em hour gone, hard riders. Asked for the sick man by name. He swallowed. I told 'em the magistrate had already been and the debt was paid and there was nothing here for them. They didn't believe me. 2 of 'em went round the back while the 3rd kept me talking. Abigail was out of the gig before it stopped. My father. He's all right, ma'am. He's all right. The man caught her arm. The nurse, she heard him at the back window, and she did a quick thing, a smart thing. Started wailing. Loud. Pulled the sheet up over his face and set to keening, like he'd just passed screaming for the minister carrying on so the whole road could hear. And the men at the back window, they saw a covered body and a woman wailing, and they... He shook his head, half disbelieving. They thought they'd come too late. Thought he was already gone. Turned their horses and rode off to tell whoever sent him that the chain man was dead. The breath went out of Abigail in a rush. He's alive. Alive and madder'n a wet cat about the sheet over his face, the man said. But yes, ma'am. The nurse bought him with a fake death. Bought you all maybe a day before they learned different. A day. They had a day before Victor's men discovered the chain man wasn't dead, a day before they came back to make it true. She ran into the house. Thomas Carter was propped against his pillow, gray and shrunken and furious, and gloriously defiantly alive. His eyes found his daughter in the doorway, and something in his ravaged face cracked open. "They put a sheet over my face," he rasped. "Like I was already in the box. I'll thank you to tell that woman I'm not in the box yet. Pa." She was on her knees at the cot, his hand in both of hers, and she was laughing and weeping at once. "Pa, you've got to swear something. Now today, while you're strong enough to hold a pen or make your mark. You've got to swear the number." He went still. "What number?" "The white oak to the boundary stone. The hill you cursed your whole life. 340 rods. She gripped his hand hard. "They wrote 412 on a forged survey, Pa. They moved the line. 70 rods of another man's land, hidden in a false distance, certified under Edward Ashford's name 6 weeks after he was dead in a river. And you're the only living soul who walked the true line. You're the only one who knows it's 340. That's why they buried you. Not for the debt, for the number." The old man's eyes filled. He looked past her to Nathaniel standing in the doorway, hat in his hands, and the recognition was there again, deeper now. "Edward's boy," Thomas whispered. "You figured it, after all this time." "She figured it," Nathaniel said quietly. "Read it off the survey in 2 minutes. Off something you cursed at your fire for 20 years. The old man laughed, a terrible, wet, joyful sound. "Course she did. I taught her to read a line before she could read her letters. Held her on my knee and walked her through a survey, same as her mother walked her through scripture." His hand tightened on Abigail's. "I thought I was passing the time. I thought I was just keeping her near. I never knew I was handing her the one thing that had—" His voice failed, came back fierce. "Get me a pen, girl. Get the minister to witness, and that man at the gate, and Edward's boy. I'll swear it. I'll swear it in my own hand if my hand'll hold. 340 rods, white oak to boundary stone, walked by my own 2 feet in the summer of the survey, and the certified figure is a lie, and Edward Ashford was dead when his name went under it." Tears ran down into the gray stubble of his cheeks. 20 years I carried that. 20 years I let them call me a drunk and a fool and a debtor, because the day I said it out loud was the day they'd kill me. And now my own daughter's married Edward's boy, and walked the proof out of the county office, and I get to say it at last with witnesses before God. His grip was iron. "Get the pen, Abigail. I've been waiting 2/3 of your life to set this down." They got the pen. Reverend Whitlock was sent for, and came, and the man at the gate stood witness, and Samuel and Nathaniel, and in a falling farmhouse with the rain long gone, and the summer sun slanting hard through the broken roof. Thomas Carter made his sworn declaration. His hand shook too badly to write the whole. So Abigail wrote it at his dictation, every word his, and he signed it with a mark that took him 3 tries, and the last of his strength, and each witness signed beneath. And Whitlock dated it, and pressed the parish seal into the wax with his own ring. A dying man's sworn word. The true number set down at last. The one thing 20 years of debt had been built to prevent. When it was done, Thomas Carter fell back against the pillow, spent smiling lighter than Abigail had seen him in years. "There," he breathed. "There. Let them call me a drunk now, Let them say it in a courtroom. I dare them." His eyes drifted to his daughter. "You hold on to that paper, girl. You hold on to it tighter than your own life, because the men who buried me will know within the day that I'm not in the box after all, and the next thing they'll want—" His eyes closed. "The next thing they'll want is that paper. And you." He slept. Nathaniel drew Abigail aside, the sworn declaration folded in oilcloth in her hands, her father's blood and ink, and 20 years of silence wrapped in a square of waxed cloth no bigger than a hymnal. "We can't keep it here," he said low. "And we can't keep it at the estate the moment Victor learns the marriage is real. The estate's the first place he'll search, and he has men inside the household he must have. We need it somewhere neither of them would think to look, with someone neither of them would think to ask." And it was Samuel hovering at the edge who cleared his throat. "Begging pardon?" the old man said. "But there's a thing nobody's said yet that wants saying." He twisted his hat. 41 years I've served that house. I've carried letters. I've kept books. I've stood in the room while Master Victor and Mr. Pierce talked over my head, same as they did over Miss Vivian's, because what's an old servant but another piece of the furniture? His old eyes were sharp. "I know where the rest of it is, ma'am. The full account. The real one. Your father's true ledger, the one Caldwell forged a second copy of. The young master said back in your farmhouse that the full account was somewhere he couldn't reach." Samuel swallowed. "It's reachable. I know where it sits, because I'm the one who was made to file it." The room went dead silent. Nathaniel turned slowly. "What did you say?" "Caldwell brought it to the estate years back. The true Carter ledger and the forged one both, so they'd be kept together where Victor could control them. Victor never liked a dangerous paper out of his own reach." Samuel's voice shook, but didn't stop. "And he had me file them. An old servant in the strong room who'd never dare read above his station, and never dare speak if he did. They never once thought the furniture could read." His chin lifted, and the same defiance Abigail had seen in her father lit the old man's face. "I read every page, ma'am. I've known for years exactly what they did to your father, and I've waited 41 years to be on the right side of something in this house. The true ledger's in the estate strong room, third shelf behind the rent rolls in a black box Victor thinks holds nothing but old correspondence." He looked at Nathaniel. "I can put my hand on it inside the hour, sir, if you'll give me leave to be a thief in the house I've kept honest 41 years. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Nathaniel crossed the room and gripped the old man by both shoulders, and his voice was rough. "Samuel, if you do this and Victor learns it was you, then I'll have done one true thing before I die, sir, same as the chain man, there, same as your father, before the both of them." Samuel's eyes were wet but steady. "I'm 70 years old. I've kept my head down so long my neck's gone crooked from it. Let me stand up straight just the once. Let me be Edward Ashford's man at the last, the way I should have been at the first when they pulled him from that river and I held my tongue." His voice broke. "I held my tongue for him, sir. I'll not hold it for the daughter of the man who walked beside him. Give me leave." Nathaniel's jaw worked. "Go," he said hoarsely. Get it, and bring it to—" He stopped thinking fast. "To Whitlock's chapel, not the estate, not here. The chapel. A church is the one place Victor can't search without raising the county. We put both papers, the sworn declaration and the true ledger, under the church's keeping witnessed, and then no fire, and no theft, and no death can make them disappear, because the county would have to be told why a church was robbed." Samuel was already reaching for his coat, but Abigail caught a thing the men in their racing had not, and it stopped her cold. "Wait," she said. "Samuel, you said you were the one made to file them. The true ledger and the forged one. Both. Together." She felt the floor tilt the way it had in her farmhouse the night Nathaniel wrote her secret number. "Which means you've known this whole time that there was a forged Carter ledger and a true one. You've known the exact shape of the crime for years." She stared at him. "Why now? Why did it take a farm girl walking into a clerk's office to move you? When you've had the truth in your own two hands for years, you could have spoken any time. Why wait for me?" The old man stopped at the door. His back was to her. And when he turned, his face had changed into something she hadn't seen on it before. Grief and shame and the particular agony of a man finally cornered by his own conscience. "Because, ma'am," Samuel said very quietly, "the forged ledger isn't only in Caldwell's hand." He looked at Nathaniel and his old face crumpled. "I've held my tongue all these years, not just from fear of the river. I held it because the second hand in that forged ledger, the witness signature that made the false account look lawful, the name that swore the forged Carter debt was true and proper, before the magistrate 20 years ago." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "It's the young master's. It's yours, sir. Signed when you were 9 years old. They used a dead surveyor's son to witness the ruin of the man who'd have cleared his father's name. Victor had your hand guided across that page as a boy, and told you it was your letter's practice." Tears spilled down the old man's face. "You've been the proof against yourself this whole time, sir, and never known it. That's why I couldn't speak. Because the moment that ledger sees the light, it doesn't only burn Victor and Caldwell." He looked between Nathaniel and Abigail, stricken. "It burns you, sir. Your name is on the crime. And I didn't know how to be the one to tell you that the family didn't just ruin the chain man. They made you the instrument of it before you were old enough to read what you were signing." The farmhouse was utterly silent. Abigail looked at her husband, at the man who'd ridden through the rain to save her father, who'd signed half a fortune to a stranger, who'd spent 20 years aching to make the liars pay, and watched the ground open under him as he understood all at once that the thing he'd hunted his whole life had his own child's signature on it, and that to clear his father's name and save her father's memory, he would have to walk into a courtroom and hand his enemies the one weapon that could destroy him too. Nathaniel did not move for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. "Show me," he said. "The signature. My signature. I want to see it with my own eyes before I decide what I am. Sir, bring the ledger to the chapel as you said, but you'll open it to that page first in front of me, and you'll point to it, and I'll look at the thing they made me do at 9 years old." His jaw was iron. "I'll not spend the rest of my life flinching from a page I never had the courage to look at. Go, Samuel. We'll meet you at Whitlock's by dark." The old man went. Abigail crossed to her husband and took his hand, and she felt how cold it had gone. Nathaniel, a child of 9 with his hand guided across a page he was told was a copybook, that's no crime. No court alive would hang a man for the letters they made him practice as a boy. You don't understand. He pulled his hand free, not unkindly, but because he could not be touched and think at once. It isn't whether a court would hang me. It's that the moment that ledger is read aloud, Victor's lawyer, Edmund Pierce, the cleverest of them, will stand up and point at it and say, "There. The whole case rests on a forged ledger, and the nephew's own name is on it, and the nephew is married to the woman bringing the claim. He'll say, we forged it ourselves. He'll say the chain man's deathbed oath is a scheme cooked up between a fortune-hunting girl and a guilty heir to steal the estate." His eyes were bleak. "My signature doesn't only damn me, Abigail, it poisons everything. The true ledger, your father's oath, all of it the instant my name appears. Pierce turns our proof into our motive. We don't walk into that courtroom with evidence. We walk in with a confession." The truth of it settled over the farmhouse like cold water. "Then we don't bring the ledger," Abigail said slowly. "We have to bring the ledger. Without it, your father's oath is one dying man's word against 20 years of certified paper. The ledger is the spine of the whole thing." "Then we bring it," she said, "and we make your name the thing that hangs them instead of us." He looked at her. "How? I don't know yet." She pressed the oilcloth packet of her father's declaration against her chest. "But I know this. Pierce expects us to hide your signature. He expects us to come in trembling, trying to keep it buried, terrified of the one page that ruins us, so we don't hide it." Her mind was moving fast now, faster than the fear. "We walk in and we hand it to them. We say it ourselves first out loud before Pierce can. A man who hides a guilty thing looks guilty. a man who carries it in his own 2 hands into the light. It looks like a man with nothing left to hide. Nathaniel finished. Something kindled in his eyes. If I confess the signature myself, the moment the ledger opens before Pierce can weaponize it. If I tell the court a 9-year-old boy was used as an instrument by the very men now claiming innocence, then your signature stops being our weakness, Abigail said. It becomes the proof of exactly how they work. They didn't just forge a dead man's name. They used a living child. What court in this country hears that a man guided a 9-year-old's hand to seal the ruin of an honest family and walks away thinking the child's the villain? She gripped his arm. Your name isn't the thing that sinks us, Nathaniel. It's the thing that shows the jury what kind of men Victor and Caldwell truly are. Pierce thinks it's a loaded gun pointed at us. We turn it around. For a long moment, Nathaniel Ashford simply looked at his wife. My father held the pen and wouldn't lie, he said softly. Your father held the chain and knew the truth, and I held a copybook at 9 and was made into their instrument. His voice steadied. And now I get to choose as a man what to do with that hand. All right. We bring it. We bring all of it. And God help Edmund Pierce. The hearing came 11 days later, and it came because Abigail forced it. She had learned in those 11 days exactly how Victor Ashford fought, not with arguments, but with delay, with continuances, with the slow grinding patience of a man who knew a dying witness could not testify forever. Twice, Pierce moved to postpone. Twice Victor's allies on the bench obliged. And it was Vivian Carlyle, who had fouled the staging houses and never once looked back, who showed Abigail how to break it. They're waiting for your father to die, Vivian said. Every day he lives is a day his oath stays fresh and a deposition can be tested. The moment he's gone, Pierce will argue the dead can't be cross-examined and move to strike the declaration entirely. They're not delaying out of strategy. They're delaying out of patience. They mean to outlive him. Her mouth thinned. So you don't let them. You petition for an immediate hearing on the grounds that the central witness is in failing health and his testimony is at risk of being lost. No magistrate in the open can deny a dying man his day. They can stall in the dark. They cannot stall in the light. So Abigail filed it herself, a chainman's daughter in her own hand, a petition for immediate hearing, and she filed it loud the way Vivian taught her in front of the county, so that the request itself became a thing the town talked about, and the magistrates who'd quietly obliged Victor twice could not quietly oblige him a third time with the whole county watching. The hearing was granted, and Thomas Carter, against every prediction the doctors had made, lived to see the morning of it. They carried him in on a litter. He had insisted. I'll not have my own oath read over me like I'm already in the box, he'd rasped. I swore it. I'll be in the room when they hear it. So they carried the chainman into the great hall of the county courthouse, gray and wasted and burning with a furious last strength, and they set his litter at the front, where the 3 magistrates could see the living man whose word was on trial. The hall was full. Victor Ashford had made certain of that. He'd wanted an audience of elites to watch a fortune-hunting farm girl humiliated, to watch the matter dismissed, to remind the county who held the strings. He sat at the front in fine black, an old man with a young man's cold eyes, and beside him sat Caldwell, heavy and certain, and Edmund Pierce, neat and dry and dangerous, his papers squared before him. And at the back, alone in plain gray, holding an oilcloth packet and a black box, stood Abigail Ashford and her husband. They called you a nobody from a cottage, Nathaniel murmured as the magistrates took their seats. I am a nobody from a cottage, Abigail said. That's rather the point. Let them keep thinking it. Pierce opened, and he opened the way Vivian had warned he would: smooth, reasonable, almost kind. He spoke of a tragic family, a farmer fallen on hard times through no one's fault but the hard years and his own poor management. He spoke with delicate regret of how desperation drives the desperate to desperate measures, how a ruined girl had contrived to marry into the Ashford family, and now, with her dying father's help, sought to manufacture a claim against the very fortune she'd married into. He attacked with documents, certified surveys, filed debts. 20 years of paper, all of it lawful, all of it sworn, all of it bearing the proper signatures and the proper seals. The defense will produce a ledger, Pierce told the magistrates, which they will claim is the true account. I ask the court to look carefully at who produced it, and who benefits, and whose hand appears upon it. I ask the court to remember that the woman bringing this claim is married to the man who could most profit from the estate's disgrace. And I ask the court to weigh the sworn certified, witnessed records of 20 years against the deathbed word of a single bankrupt and the convenient ledger of his ambitious daughter. He sat. The truth, gentlemen, is usually the simpler story. And the simpler story is that a desperate family reached too high. It was good. It was very good. Abigail felt the room move toward him, felt the elites nod, felt the magistrates settle into the comfortable conclusion they'd been handed. Then they called her to speak, expecting her to argue. She did not argue. She walked to the front of the hall, and she set the black box on the table, and before she said a word about her father, before she said a word about the survey, she opened the box and took out the forged ledger and laid it open to a page she had marked, and she turned to face, not the magistrates, but the whole watching room. "Before I say one word about what was done to my father," Abigail said, and her voice carried clear to the back of the hall, "I'm going to tell you the worst thing about my own husband, because Mr. Pierce is going to tell you anyway, and I'd rather you heard it from the people it shames than the people who did it." The room went silent. She felt Pierce go still at his table. She had taken his weapon out of his hand before he'd raised it. "This is the forged ledger," she said. "The false account they built to bury my father in debts he never truly owed. And there is a second signature on it, a witness signature that made the lie look lawful before a magistrate 20 years ago." She set her finger on it. "It's my husband's name, Nathaniel Ashford, signed when he was 9 years old." A murmur ran through the hall. "Mr. Pierce wants you to look at this name and think there's the guilt. There's the scheme. The nephew was in on it from the start." She lifted her chin. "So let me tell you how a 9-year-old boy comes to put his name on the ruin of an honest man. My husband's father, Edward Ashford, was a surveyor the best in the state, and he was murdered, pulled from a river 6 weeks before his own name appeared on a certified survey he could not possibly have signed because he was dead. And after they killed the father, they took the son, an orphan, 9 years old, raised in the house of the very men who'd drowned his father, and they sat that child down with a pen, and they guided his hand across this page, and they told him it was his letter's practice." Her voice did not rise, but it filled the room. "They used a murdered man's child to seal the murder. That is the kind of men who built this fortune. Not careless men, not unlucky men. Men who would put a pen in a grieving boy's fist to make their crime look lawful. My husband carried that signature for 20 years without knowing what it was. And rather than hide it from you today, he asked me to show it to you first, because he would rather lose everything in the light than keep one coin earned in the dark." She turned finally to the magistrates. "Mr. Pierce told you the truth is the simpler story. He's right. Here's the simple story. They killed the surveyor who wouldn't lie. They buried the chain man who knew the truth. And they used the surveyor's orphaned son to do it. Everything else, every certified survey, every filed debt, every sworn record, is the paper they wrapped around those 3 facts to make them respectable." She drew the oilcloth packet from her father's declaration. "And now I'm going to show you the one number that unwraps all of it." She opened her father's sworn declaration, and she read it. The white oak at the creek. The long, hard pull up the rise 340 rods walked by his own 2 feet in the summer of the survey. And then she opened the certified survey beside it and showed them the figure written there, 412. 70 rods of difference. 70 rods of another man's land hidden inside a single false distance, certified under a dead man's name. "My father is the only living soul who walked that line," she said. "He's lying on that litter because the men in this room spent 20 years making certain he'd be too poor and too disgraced to ever say this number out loud in a room that mattered." "Well," her voice broke for the first time and she let it. "He's saying it now. in a room that matters, with his own breath, while he still has it. And then the chain man spoke. Thomas Carter raised himself on the litter. The nurse moved to stop him, and he waved her off, and in a voice that should not have had the strength it found, he addressed the three magistrates directly. "I walked that line in the summer of the survey," he said. "White oak to boundary stone. 340 rods. I cursed every one of 'em climbing that hill with the chain. I've cursed 'em at my own fire for 20 years since. Edward Ashford wrote down what I walked true and honest, and they killed him for it, and they forged his name, and they buried me alive in lies so I'd never say the number." His eyes blazed at Victor. "There's the man who did it. He knows I walked it. He's known 20 years. Ask him under oath, did Thomas Carter walk the White Oak line? Ask him to swear I didn't. Go on, Victor. Swear it." His voice cracked like a whip. "Swear before God and these magistrates that the chain man's wrong. I dare you. I've waited 20 years for you to have to say it to my face." Victor Ashford did not rise, did not speak, could not without perjury swear against a thing he knew to be true, and would not before the bench swear to a lie he could be caught in. His silence was the loudest thing in the hall. And then Pierce did the thing Abigail had been waiting for, the thing she'd known he'd reach for, because it was the only move he had left. He rose smooth as ever, and he turned the knife the only way it could still cut. "A moving story," he said. "But the ledger that supposedly proves all this, the true account, where did it come from? Who produced it? It appeared from nowhere, conveniently in the hands of the very people who'd profit. I put it to the court that this ledger is itself a forgery manufactured by the defense. There is no witness who can testify to its origin, no chain of keeping, nothing but the word of an ambitious woman and a guilty heir." He spread his hands. "Show me one honest soul who can swear where that ledger has been these 20 years, and I'll concede the point. There is no such person." "There is," said a voice from the back of the hall. Every head turned. Samuel came forward, 70 years old, crook-necked, twisting his hat in his hands, and he walked the length of that great hall, under the eyes of all the county, and he stood before the magistrates, with his back as straight as his old spine would allow. "My name's Samuel Reed," he said. 41 years in service to the Ashford house, and I'm the man who filed that ledger." His voice shook and held. "Mr. Caldwell brought the true account and the forged one both to the estate years back, and he had me file 'em in the strong room because what's an old servant but furniture? Who'd ever think the furniture could read?" His chin came up. "I read every page. I've known for years what was done to Tom Carter. The true ledgers sat in that strong room, third shelf behind the rent rolls, in a black box Master Victor believed held old letters this whole time. I took it out with my own hands 11 days past, and carried it to Reverend Whitlock's chapel, where it's been under the church's keeping, and witnessed every hour since. There's your chain of keeping, sir." He looked at Pierce, and there was no fear left in him at all. "I can swear where it's been every day for 20 years, because I'm the man who put it there, and the man who took it out. And I'll swear it on any Bible you set in front of me before God with what's left of my life." Pierce had no answer. For the first time, the dry, precise voice had nothing to set down on the counter. And then Caldwell heavy. Certain Caldwell, who had held the debts and forged the second account, and never once in 20 years imagined a day like this, made the mistake men make when the floor goes out from under them. He turned on Victor. "You said the old servant couldn't read," he hissed loud enough to carry. "You said the strong room was secure. You told me that ledger could never—" He caught himself. Too late. The hall heard it. The magistrates heard it. The whole county heard Elias Caldwell in a single panicked sentence confirm that there was a ledger, that it had been hidden, that its secrecy had been a thing he and Victor managed together. The room broke into noise. It was, Abigail would think for the rest of her life, the truest justice of all, that in the end the men were undone not by her, not by the law, but by their own certainty cracking under them. Caldwell turning on Victor. Victor's silence damning him. Pierce, the cleverest of them, sitting suddenly still as he understood the case was already lost, not on a point of law, but on the simple human fact that liars, when cornered, cannot keep their stories straight and honest. Men, even old servants and dying farmers, can. The senior magistrate called for order 3 times before he got it, and when the hall fell quiet, he did not rule from comfort. He ruled from the weight of what he'd seen. He ordered the certified survey impounded as suspect. He ordered the true ledger and the chain man's sworn declaration entered into the permanent record of the county. He ordered an inquiry into the death of Edward Ashford, 20 years cold, reopened on the strength of a signature that post-dated a man's drowning. And he ordered the debts against the estate and persons of Thomas Carter struck entirely as founded on a fraudulent account, and the 70 rods of land, and every acre taken from every family on that forged line opened to reclamation. It would take years to unwind. Fortunes built over 2 decades do not collapse in an afternoon. But the spine of it broke in that hall in that hour, and everyone in the room knew it. Victor Ashford rose at last, then not to speak, but to leave the way powerful men leave when they understand the power's gone. He stopped before Nathaniel on his way out, and the two of them looked at each other. The uncle who'd raised the orphan, and the orphan who'd just unmade him. Your father, Victor said very low, was a fool who valued a line on a map over his own family's prosperity. I gave you everything he was too proud to take, and this is how you repay it. My father, Nathaniel said, valued the truth over you. I spent 20 years not understanding that was the same as valuing it over a lie. He held the old man's eye. You raised me, Victor. You fed me and schooled me and put a pen in my hand at 9 years old to make me your instrument. And the one thing you could never teach me, the one thing that turned out to be in me anyway, from him, from my father, was the thing that just brought you down. I'm not sorry. I'm only sorry it took me this long. Victor Ashford walked out of the hall and into the long undoing of everything he'd built, and he did not look back, because men like him never do. In the quiet after Abigail knelt beside her father's litter, Thomas Carter was spent past speaking. Now the furious last strength burned clean out of him, but his eyes were open and clear, and fixed on his daughter, and his hand found hers. You said it, Pa, she whispered. In a room that mattered. You said the number. He could not answer in words, but his fingers tightened on hers once hard, and his cracked lips moved, and she bent close to hear, and what he breathed against her ear was not about the ledger or the survey or the men he'd outlasted. Your mother, he whispered, would've, and he could not finish it, but he didn't need to, because his eyes finished it for him shining. He lived 8 more days. Long enough to be carried back to the clean, paid-for house that was his daughter's, now free and clear. Long enough to sit in the summer sun in the dooryard with a blanket over his knees and watch the road he'd guarded his whole life, knowing at last that nothing was coming up it to take anything from him. Long enough for Abigail to read to him in the evenings, and for Nathaniel to sit with him and talk haltingly at first, and then easily, of Edward Ashford the surveyor, the man who held the pen and wouldn't lie, so that at the end the chain man and the surveyor's son talked of the surveyor like men keeping a good man's memory warm between them. He died in his sleep on the 9th night in a free house, owing no man a coin. His daughter's hand in his, the sworn declaration that had cleared his name, folded in the county's permanent record, where no liar could ever reach it again. They buried him beside the white oak. Abigail chose the spot herself. It seemed right that the chain man should rest at the start of the only line that ever truly mattered, the one he'd walked and cursed and carried in his mouth like a stone for 20 years, and finally, at the last, set down. The reckoning came slowly to the others the way Vivian had said it would. Caldwell's banking houses, examined now by men who knew where to look, gave up a decade of forged accounts beyond the Carter ledger, and he ended his days a ruined man in the kind of debt he'd once inflicted on others. Pierce, too clever to be caught at a crime, but too tainted to keep his standing, drifted out of the county and out of the story. The Ashford fortune broke apart over years of reclamation suits. Parcel by parcel returned to the families it had been stolen from, until the great estate was a great estate, no longer just a large house on an honest amount of land which suited the people who lived in it. now far better than it ever had. The man who'd built it on theft. Vivian Carlyle did not marry into any fortune in the end. She did something the men who'd raised her to be ornamental never imagined. She took the modest settlement that was hers by right and bought a printing press, and she began to publish pamphlets at first, then a small weekly sheet on the matter of the land reclamations and the families seeking what had been taken from them. She turned out to have a gift for it. The men who'd spoken freely in front of the furniture for 11 years had taught her without meaning to exactly how power talks when it thinks no one's listening, and she spent the rest of her life making certain it was overheard. She and Abigail, who had begun as the bitterest sort of rivals across a clerk's counter, became something closer than friends. Two women who'd each been measured for a small life by men who underestimated them and who'd each refused the measurement. And Abigail and Nathaniel, the thread she had felt and refused to name on the night they married, through the rain, through the riddles, through the long fight. She named it in the end in her own time, on her own terms, the way she'd insisted on everything since the night she'd turned a rescue into a partnership at her own broken table. It did not come fast. The best things her father had taught her never did. You walked them carefully, foot by foot, like a true line, and you didn't let them drag. One evening in the dooryard of the house her father had died free in, with the white oak throwing its long shade over the chainman's grave, Nathaniel said to her what he had nearly said in a clerk's office a lifetime before. "I came up that road the first night for the air," he said, "for what you carried. I told you that plainly, and I'll not unsay it now." "I know," Abigail said. "You were honest about it. It's why I trusted you. But I want you to hear the rest of it finally, the part I couldn't say then." He took her hand, the one that wore his mother's ring. "I didn't choose you to clear my father's name. I didn't choose you to bring down Victor, or to win the case, or because you were the witness's blood." His voice was rough and certain. "I chose you because in 20 years of fine rooms full of clever, frightened, calculating people, you were the only soul I ever met who walked into the worst night of her life with iron in her hand and asked for nothing but the truth. You never once asked me for safety. You never asked to be saved. You asked to be a partner in the fight on your own table, on your own terms, with your father dying in the corner. I'd never seen anyone do that. I've never seen anyone do it since. Only you." Abigail Ashford looked at the man she had married to save her father in the house